Hey there. Welcome to Toy Talk with Mike and Chad, episode 76.
I'm Mike.
I'm Chad. And the toys we will be talking about today are some of Mike's new Transformers.
Yes. Now, some of these aren't that new. I've had some of these guys for maybe a couple of months now. But one thing that's Transformers is one of my main
Right.
collections. We both collect G.I. Joe. We both collect some DC, Masters of the Universe, Marvel Legends is one of my big ones. But Transformers is one of my largest collections. And I didn't get like any Transformers
This year,
this
really.
year. For the first 2 quarters, the first half of the year, I didn't buy a single Transformer. Now, in a way, that's good because I need some of my collections to wind down.
Yeah.
And Transformers is one of those collections where I just really want like one good version of all the Generation 1 characters, essentially. And I've almost achieved that. My collection is pretty close to complete. So there's not that many more characters I need. Just because they keep making more Bumblebees and Optimus Primes doesn't really mean I need to buy them. So I thought maybe I'm going to make it through this year with no Transformers. But but even this is still a pretty light
Yeah.
load of Transformers because usually I think I make it through the last several years have been like probably 30 plus Transformers or so. And here I've got maybe about 10. So and this is it for the year. So a couple of these I got in like the third quarter. Most of them I've got in this fourth quarter. So I just kind of figured I'd save them all up and talk about them in one video.
Sounds good.
Now, you are not much of a Transformers collector.
I used to be, and I sold them all in like 2012. And
And
I regret that.
those are your vintage ones,
Yeah.
right? Yeah. I don't have my vintage ones either. I had a good sized collection when I was a kid, but when I was like a tween and I was like, I got to get rid of some of my toys, Transformers were on the chopping block. I kept my G.I. Joes, but Transformers went. I only kept my absolute favorites.
Favorites.
And I had some cool ones. Like I had Shockwave, I had Soundwave, I had Optimus. I had a lot of cool guys, and I got rid of all of them. Probably sold them for a couple of bucks a
Yeah.
piece. And the handful of Transformers I kept, I think there was like three or four I kept. But I think there was one Autobot. So the one Autobot Transformer I decided to keep for my whole vintage collection, which I still have, but he's packed away in a box right now, so I can't show him to you. But I do have the vintage reproduction. So this is just like the toy I had. But this is Gears. So I don't know if you know this guy or had him as a kid.
I know this guy. I didn't have him as a kid, but
But like I love him. I think he's adorable. But to think that I got rid of Optimus Prime and Grapple and Inferno and I kept that little thing, it's a little mind boggling, I think. But I love him. Still too.
yeah, he's cute.
Yeah. He is a really cool character. And again, I don't know if I have it handy. Yes, I do. So when I started collecting Transformers again as an adult, I thought they would get to him pretty early because like he's not like one of the main guys. Obviously, they're going to do Bumblebee and stuff first, but he is one of the original like 1984 Transformers. He was in the cartoon. He was in the comic books, so he's one that fans know. And it just years went by, and like there was nothing.
No
And
Gears.
I was just waiting and waiting and waiting for them to make a good Gears, and then they just wouldn't. And then they finally churned one out, and I thought it was a real piece of shit. Like, but yeah, this figure sucks.
Yeah, he's not cool.
He's not cute, and he's not cool.
He's
It's just
clunky.
it's a poorly made
Cheap
piece of
cheap
shit.
plastic.
And so then here I had a really cool like because he was one of the I think mini cons we call them or whatever. So he was just one of these little teeny guys. But the other guys that were in like Bumblebee, the original Bumblebee was the same size. The original Cliff Jumper, the original Cosmos, the original Warpath, Sea Spray, and I was getting all these characters and in nice new versions, and yet they disrespected Gears with this rinky dinky thing. So I had to go to the third party creators. So there is a ton of companies. I don't know how they get away with it, but they basically make knockoff Transformers. Except when you hear knockoff, you think cheap. These things are not cheap. They're expensive and they're well made. And these companies put a lot of time and effort and care into these products. But it looks just like Optimus Prime, but they'll call him like Optimus Steve. And you're like, I know that's Optimus Prime, but it's like you changed the name, and I guess that's how they get around getting in trouble. So I bought 2 third-party gears. So I got this one, which I think is pretty great.
Yeah, he does look good.
Yeah, I think that was made by a company called Make Toys, I believe, and he's really cool. It looks like gears. It's a nice little upgrade. Um, and one thing that I like about gears is if you notice on this vintage toy, he had this visor face, this kind of like. But
wasn't that supposed to like slide?
Well, in the cartoons, and this was the common, a lot of the toys had visor faces. Even Bumblebee had a visor face. But in the cartoons, they had like faces. And I think that was done so they could just emote and express in the show. So yeah, he had this visor face. But when I got this version here, he's got the human face with the mouth and the nose. But he had a little snap-on piece that you could replace him to give him the visored head, which I don't know which one I like better, to be honest.
I like the face.
I like the face too, but there's some the toy that I loved as a kid had the visor face, so I like both versions. So this guy I've chosen to display in my collection with the face exposed, and I think he looks really cool. Then I bought this one from a company called iGear, I believe, and
I like this one.
I like this one too. And that one does. It's hard to do it. Carefully, don't scratch the paint up. But the head turns. So his head is kind of like inside the however you want to describe it. It's kind of buried in the plastic here, and you can spin it with your like thumbnail, and you can choose between the visor face or the human face, and they both look really good. I like the size of this toy. I like how he's big and chunky because Gears always felt like he was supposed to be kind of buff, and so I really liked these.
Yeah,
so
I like this guy a lot.
So I was so pleased with these. These guys have been proudly displayed on my collection with all my official Transformers. There's not a whole lot of third-party stuff that I have, but this one I thought Hasbro's never going to top this stuff, so I'm just going to keep those there. So I think it was just I don't know if he went up for sale last year or he went up for pre-order early this year, but they actually were releasing a new Gears figure, and I chose not to buy it. I was like, I don't need it. I've got these ones here. I didn't think it looked better than those ones there. So even though it was appealing that he was official, it's just like, I don't need it. And then there's another, do you remember Cosmos, the little green UFO guy?
Yes.
So I had him when I was a kid too. I loved him. He looked kind of fat the way he was, because he was a flying saucer, and then his little arms came up, but he still had this kind of round belly and stuff. Anyway, I always really liked Cosmos. This is an official Hasbro release from several years ago. This is my Cosmos, and I thought they did a really good job with him because they managed to still make him a UFO, but he's not fat anymore. Like he carries the bulk up in his chest rather than his belly, and I love that figure actually. So it's a little smaller than I would like because you saw with my Gears here, and most of my Bumblebee figures, they've upsized them from. So this guy's bigger than the vintage one, but not much. So he looks a little small compared to his like friends, you know. But anyway, they did a new Cosmos last year, and I considered buying him, but I was trying to. Like I like this one. I was like, do I really need another Cosmos? So I didn't buy that one either. Another character, there was a little red tank called Warpath. I don't know if you remember Warpath.
Vaguely.
So he was also this little teeny thing. This figure is probably, I don't know, it's more than 10 years old. But this was an updated version of Warpath that Hasbro put out, and I quite liked it. He looks like him. He's way more articulated than the vintage one. So again, this one I thought was good. I didn't feel I needed another one. And then last year or the year before, they did a new version of Warpath. And I was like, he's a little bit better, but I'm not going to bother. It's not different enough. So See what a good job I've been doing. This is the kind
Yeah,
of thing
I'm proud of you.
my wife and my mom they don't see these stories.
I know them.
They just see me buying new stuff. They don't realize the sacrifices I make about
Yeah.
not buying stuff. But then this year they released what they called a GoBots 3-pack.
Yeah.
Now, do you remember the GoBots?
I remember the GoBots.
Who was your favorite GoBot?
Jesus.
I liked Coptor, the guy that turns into
The
a copter.
Yeah.
The names were not great.
I don't know.
I had Coptor and Sidekill, who turns
I
into
had Sidekill.
Yeah, so it was just Cycle, which is Cycle.
Yeah.
And then the red sports car on the good guy was Turbo. That was my brother's favorite. And then the leader of the good guys was Leader 1. He was a jet, a gray jet. It looked like a Top Gun jet or something.
I'm just going to Google that right quick.
But anyway, so I liked GoBots. They were kind of the cheaper version of Transformers back in the day, but they were produced by Tonka, and they were a rival to Transformer toys. Anyway, somewhere along the way, Hasbro bought Tonka.
Yeah.
And with the purchase, they got the rights to the GoBots. So in a perfect world, Hasbro would have been producing nice new updated version of all those 80s GoBot figures, just like they do with their 80s Transformer figures. However, there were some legal problems because just like the Transformers, they were made by a Japanese company called Takara. And then Hasbro licensed those things from Takara, and they made Transformers. So similarly, Tonka licensed from a company in Japan, and that company in Japan didn't go bankrupt. So when Hasbro bought Tonka, they got the rights to all the names, everything Tonka added to the toys, which was like the names and the name GoBots itself. But as far as the actual character designs, that was still owned by the company in Japan. So Hasbro couldn't just make a new Coptor figure and a new Turbo figure. And so that's kind of frustrating because the GoBot characters, who over in Japan are called Machine Robo, those are guys that are kind of like in limbo. I would love updated GoBot figures, but it doesn't happen. There have been a couple that have trickled out over the years, but not many.
What was the name of the Starscream knockoff GoBot? Do you remember that?
Well, I think Leader 1 is the closest thing that looks like Starscream, but I don't know. I had a seaplane
because and
his name was Water Walk. He was like a white jet that folded, but anyway. So yeah, I'm not sure exactly who you would be thinking about. I don't know.
I was too young. I didn't know really the names of them. I had quite a few of them. Okay. Cycle. Didn't have Coptor.
Coptor is the best. Here's a funny little Coptor story. So when I was a kid, I wanted Coptor so bad, almost the same as I was obsessed with Merman. I wanted Merman when I was a kid from Masters of the Universe. So I saw Coptor displayed in a consumers distributing catalog. And for those of you who don't know consumers distributing, it was like one of our big department stores. Except what was weird about it is you couldn't actually go into the store and walk through the aisles. They would send you a big fat catalog. You would circle the items you want, and you'd go up to a desk, and the guys would go into the back room and bring it to you. And so I remember seeing this Coptor. It was the first time we'd ever seen GoBots. It was like the first year they came out, so this was probably like the 1983 consumers catalog or something. And then when they brought me the Coptor figure, I was like, that's not the guy I want from the magazine. And I opened them up, and in the consumer's catalog, they actually just took Coptor and they put him in backwards. So it was his back was facing the camera, and I thought that was his front. Because on his face, he's got like a face with a nose and a mouth, but on the back of his head was the cockpit of the helicopter, which was like this orange windshield.
Yeah.
And I thought he had this like orange glass face because I was the front. Anyway, so I fell in love with the back of Coptor before I got him, and then I ended up liking the front of him just as much. But it was just weird that I really wanted this toy because whoever was taking the pictures didn't know the difference and put them in the catalog backwards.
They had one of those consumer places in Bedford.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's
right where Dooley's is now, I believe.
Yeah. Not far from here, but yeah, long, long gone since we were children. Anyway, so GoBots. All that is to say that Hasbro owns the name to the GoBots, but they can't make the characters. So they did this 3-pack of figures this year, where they took 3 existing molds they've already done, and they changed the paint jobs, and they just put GoBot names on them. So for Warpath, the maroon tank, so the version of him that I didn't buy, they repainted that green, and they gave him the GoBot name Treds. So Treds was the name of a GoBot, but he didn't look anything like this.
Is it spelled with a Z or a Z?
No, it's just Treds. So it's still spelled wrong, but it's not with a Z. But anyway, I thought this was cool because, so it's Treds. He's a unique character because I don't have a Treds on my Transformers collection. But it also gave me an excuse to finally justify buying that Warpath mold that I didn't buy. So I'm like, I got it anyway, but it's even better because it's a unique character. So that's cool. I don't know if
he's cool.
Yeah, I don't know if you have a preference for which one's better. This guy's head, that's much truer to the vintage toy. This guy's a little bit more of a stylized version.
Modern.
I like this one is more classic looking.
For me, I think if I could take his head and put it on his body, that would be the best.
Yeah, this guy's he's a little shorter. I did like the stature of this guy better. But I think this mold's just it's a little cleaner. This one's a little gangly. He's a little... Yeah. Anyway, so I thought this was a really cool figure. So I was happy to get it as Treds. I think it looks great. It's a nice little mold.
Can the cannon go up and down?
I believe so. It looks like it, but I don't want to mess with it.
Yeah, don't mess with it. Or go in, because that looks a little better. I mean, this huge... Let me choose my words carefully here.
It's phallic.
This huge rod coming out of his chest.
Yeah. So the gun turret can retract some, so it's not so obvious. I think I had it kind of poking right out there. But anyway, so that's
cool.
So that's a cool little figure. And then the other one they put in here. So there was a spaceship in the GoBots called Pathfinder. He was black and silver. And he was a sleek-looking spaceship. He looked more like the Millennium Falcon or something. Anyway, they took Cosmos, the big fat flying saucer, and they named him Pathfinder, and they colored him blue instead of green. So the Cosmos figure that I skipped, because I didn't really feel the need to upgrade this guy, I now had an excuse to buy that mold. So the Cosmos would have looked just like this, except the blue would have been green.
Right.
So... I'm kind of glad I didn't buy that Cosmos even more now, because knowing that I would have had to buy Pathfinder, because I want Pathfinder because it's a unique character, it really doesn't... I don't need Cosmos now. But this is a cool figure. You can see he's bigger in stature than my Cosmos, but he does go back to feeling kind of fat, as opposed to this guy who feels kind of buff. So, yeah, we're back to old school fat Cosmo.
I like the fatty.
Yeah, it gives him some character. Yeah. I never did have an issue with it, but I did like how that version there, they found a way around it.
He's not fat. He's just big fat.
Yeah. Anyway, so this is another successful figure.
He's cool. I like him.
And then the last GoBot in the pack was... They took a GoBot truck whose name was Smallfoot, and they took the Gears figure that I didn't buy, and they painted it in these ugly ass colors, and they called it Smallfoot. And once I got this figure in hand, I thought this one's actually really ugly. I don't like it very much.
Not a fan. Is that pink?
Yeah, it's a pink face. It's a pink. It's a girl, by the way. It's on
her face.
Yeah, so she's got a pink face, a red and an orange. It's a really ugly color scheme. Yeah, and it's not even it doesn't match the GoBot color scheme.
No.
So it's just they just kind of pulled this color scheme out of thin air.
You still got an elastic attached to this?
Yeah, I do.
Okay, but yeah, I'm not. That looks like it. Yeah.
Yeah, I was unimpressed with this character. Now I should just mention these colors. There is some precedent, because probably about Jesus Christ, I would say almost 20 years ago, maybe they did release a convention set called GoBots, and there were 6 Transformer Minicons that they gave GoBot names, and they painted in these new colors. And so these new ones here are upgrades of that box set. So they had already done Gears in orange and pink and red, and they'd already done Cosmos in blue and called them Pathfinder. So these are update versions of those old toys. So anyway, but once I got this in hand, I was like, you know what? I actually really like the build. I'm like, I like how it poses. I like the size of it. I'm like, it makes for an ugly Pathfinder, but I'm actually kind of starting to regret not getting it as Gears. So I immediately, like the day after I opened the set, I ordered Gears. And I got them. And I got to say, I love this figure. I think it's really cool.
That looks nice.
Yes. It's like, there's still things I really like about my third-party versions, but like this guy, there is something about the fact that he's officially licensed that makes him I feel good about having him in my collection. The colors are nice. The sculpt is nice. It's a great figure. I'm really pleased with him.
Yeah, I'm a fan of this one. I would agree with the third-party stuff, though. I think the third-party, even though it's unique, this is licensed.
Yeah. In fact, so I liked this guy so much.
You bought another one,
I bought another one because shortly after I bought it, they put up another version of this for pre-order. It was a Walmart exclusive, I think.
Of course.
So I got it from Walmart. So I don't have it yet. I don't think it's expected to ship until like the first week of January. But it's the same figure with a lighter blue, and it's got the visor face instead of the human face. So I can have the best of both worlds now. So it will be a nice little version. Like, see how this blue is darker than this blue? So the new version I'm getting is going to look almost just like this one. It's going to be that lighter blue, and it's got the visor face. So I will happily have both of them in my collection. Yeah. So, yeah. Great stuff. All right. Here's another. This was kind of a weird little pack. So, you're familiar with the Insecticons, I assume?
I sure am.
Yeah, so, but when you think of the Insecticons, what do you think about? You probably think of the three...
Ransack.
Well, I'd be impressed if you thought of Ransack. I don't know if you actually remember Ransack or you just know that I bought him last year.
No, I remember Ransack.
Yeah. Because there was 3 purple and black Insecticons, which was Bombshell, Shrapnel, and
Kickback.
Yeah, so those guys came out, and I knew about them, and they were in the cartoons, they were in the comic books, they were pretty heavily featured, and I loved them because they all had unique ways of talking. But it was like later I found some of my friends had these other like bigger Insecticons. They were like bigger bugs, and I was like, who are these guys? Like, they're not in the cartoon, they're not in the show. And I thought they might have been knockoffs, because back in the 80s there was knockoff Transformers everywhere. So I didn't really know what the deal was with these other Insecticons, because they came in Transformer boxes, but I never really saw them in stores. They were just kind of things that showed up in my friends' collections, and it was hard to verify if they were real because there was no
internet.
Yeah, and they weren't on the the package inserts. Sometimes you'd get a little folded piece of paper that shows you the other toys. These guys were never on them, so I'm like, what are these things? So these also have a little bit of a weird background in that when Hasbro was going to Japan and taking up all these concepts, Takara owned most of them. So Takara and Hasbro had a deal where, like, yeah, you can take our toys and market them to Americans and whatever. But there was another company that made those deluxe Insecticons, and Hasbro said, hey, we'll get those too. But there wasn't the same arrangement with Takara. Because when Hasbro made, because Hasbro is the one that paid for the Transformers cartoons and everything to get made, so that benefits
to sell the toys.
Yeah. And that benefited Takara because they're like, okay, we're going to air your cartoon in Japan, and so it works for both of us. But because Takara didn't own these bugs in Japan, they didn't want these characters to appear in the media, because when they brought it over to Japan, they'd be advertising their competitors' toys. Right. So there was a mandate that these guys got left out of all the media. So that's why we never saw these deluxe Insecticons, and why they appear so rarely in like remake toys. These characters have never been remade since they first came out in like 1985 until this year. So I got Ransack. He's the black and yellow grasshopper. I got him last year. This year it was a 2-pack with Barrage and Chop Shop. So first time since the 80s. So pretty excited to get these guys because I never even owned them when I was a kid. These are my first ever versions. Well, it's my first ever Barrage. I do have this little Chop Shop from a couple years ago that Hasbro put out. So he's cute.
Yeah, he's cute.
But this one's better. So
what is this guy?
He's like a stag beetle.
Stag beetle, okay.
Yeah. So yeah, he's a cool. These are one of those things that they look really cool in bug mode too. It almost makes me. I never transform my Transformers, and because I don't care about cars and jets, doesn't do anything for me. But when you have things that turns into dinosaurs and bugs, that's kind of where I'm like, I almost want to buy them twice so I can put them in bug mode and robot mode. But I think these toys are really good. They're retools of the Insecticons. Like if you see the top shelf there, I've got Shrapnel. So this guy is very similar to Shrapnel. In build, because they're both stag beetles. So why wouldn't you use the same kind of? But he's got a unique head. And he's got like even the teeth of the stag beetle are unique. Like there are a lot of new parts on him, and same as Barrage. He's actually a retool of Bombshell.
Yeah.
And he's like radically different because even him, the front of him is like the back of Bombshell. So like they've completely reversed how you display him. So yeah, you put him on a shelf next to Bombshell and you wouldn't even recognize that they're part of the same, basically the same toy because yeah, they've just flipped him around and kind of like Coptor. They've got him backwards. Yeah. But anyway, I think these guys are both really successful looking toys, and it's really cool that this at this point in time in my collection, because I've been buying Transformers as an adult for more than 10 years now, and to be getting characters for the first time since the 80s, like it's nice to be. I feel like I'm getting close to complete with my collection. There's not too many more characters that they're going to surprise me with, but I still have 4 more here to talk about today. So maybe we'll start. There was a 2-pack that came out earlier this year. I think it was an online exclusive. So there was one figure I really wanted out of this pack. There's another figure I didn't really care about so much. I'll talk about the toy I didn't care about so much. So this guy here is Ruckus. Now, the one benefit that Ruckus has going for him is that he is a character that I don't have. So it's cool to get a character that I don't already have in my collection. This is another vintage character from the 80s who has never had a new toy until now. So they've never really stopped making Transformers. Yeah. Like when you consider Transformers started coming out in 84 and how many Optimus Primes and how many Bumblebees exist in the world, like no joke, like hundreds. And we're finally getting some of these characters for the second time ever just now. Now, I don't remember this guy from when I was a kid. I don't know if you do.
I don't.
Because he came out later. Like, I was kind of already done buying Transformers. I think he came out in, like, 88. And he was part of a line called Triggercons. And they had a bit of a gimmick that these 2 guns on the original toy, I think, like, flipped into the Transformers.
Yeah,
flip around or something. I didn't have them. I never would have missed this character if they didn't make this toy. Like, unlike the Insecticons, who I always felt like I was missing, I didn't even really remember this guy existed because he never shows up in the fiction or anything either, really. So I was just like, yeah, I don't care about Ruckus. But he came in this 2-pack. Now I've got him. And I'm happy to have him. But it does feel kind of like a cheap toy. I don't know if you have any thoughts. But
oh, yeah. As soon as I touched him, you can tell the plastic is kind of...
Like, it feels like a toy from the 80s.
Yeah.
Like, he's more posable than a toy from the 80s, but he just has that...
I do like his face sculpt, though.
Yep. His colors are okay.
Yeah. Is that a beige?
It's like a purple and beige, which is not, like, a super exciting color scheme, but it's different. Like, I don't think I have any other purple and beige Transformers. So yeah, he's fine. Totally adequate for what I need. But the character that he came with was Bludgeon.
Yeah.
And Bludgeon is one of my favorite
Transformers. Samurai.
Yeah. And so Bludgeon is a character that I have wanted a proper figure of for a long time because kind of like with Gears, I thought he would be a shoo-in because he's a fan favorite. He looks cool. He's very like toyetic. Like he makes for a cool toy. And I just couldn't understand why Hasbro was taking so long to make a Bludgeon figure. I had a stylized one that was based on the old like Transformers animated look
Yeah.
or something, but that was cartoony looking. It didn't fit in with my G1 aesthetic. And then it was just earlier this year, actually. I was gonna say last year, but I think it was just this year. We got this Bludgeon toy, and I was so pumped about this Bludgeon toy. I was like, finally, we have a proper Bludgeon. He's big and menacing. He's detailed. He's built on the same mold that was used for Turn, which I already loved for Turn, and I actually think it works quite well for Bludgeon too. Those triple treads on the shoulders is such a cool look. It really makes him look like a linebacker or something. So when I got this toy, I thought, I'm done. I've got an awesome Bludgeon. Not to mention the Super 7 Ultimate version I got around the same time. I thought he's also awesome in a different way. I'm like, I'll never need to buy another Bludgeon figure again. And then they put this one up for pre-order, and I was like,
I need to get this Bludgeon.
Yes. So that one is based on his look from the IDW comic books, which I've told you before, that's like some of my favorite comic books of all time.
Yeah.
Like, I'm a huge comic book nerd. I've been reading comic books since the mid 80s. And like the 2005 run of Transformers from IDW, I think is some of the like chef's kiss Transformer. Like, it's some of the best comic books ever. And Bludgeon, he looked like this, where he was these weird colors, yellow and green, and his lower jaw was missing. So there's just all these
like wires,
exposed wires, which there was something just so creepy about it, and made him like very like menacing. And
Davy Jones, like from Pirates.
Yeah, I kind of see that. But as soon as it was the kind of toy like I didn't know I needed it until I saw it, and I was like, yes, of course, that's so cool that they did that. So, of these two Bludgeons, because I think they will both be up for consideration for my best of the year this year, I think this guy trounces the other one, to be honest with you. And that one's still a good toy.
That is a good toy.
But I like this one better. So
I would agree with you.
Plus, he feels sturdier. Like, if you just hold the two of them.
Yeah, oh yeah, he's 100%.
Like, that guy, the guns on his backpack are, like, sliding around all over the place and everything.
I don't want to move them too much.
So, yeah, they've made some improvements. I don't know what exactly they did. And he's not, I should mention, he's not just a repaint. Like, if you look at him side by side, like, they gave him a new head, obviously, but if you look at his chest,
yeah,
it's different.
Chest.
His kind of waist piece is different. So, like, there is some new tooling and stuff that went into this. And, yeah, I think it's really, really cool. I love it. All right, two more. So this is a character, I'll be honest, when this toy went up for sale, I didn't know who this guy was. I'm like, what? But I think it was actually maybe 2 years ago that they did, it was during the Kingdom line of Transformers. They put out Cyclonus. You know Cyclonus?
He's one of my dudes.
Yeah, so he's one of the guys that was introduced in the movie. Kind of the replacement Starscream, except not a buffoon.
Yeah.
So I loved that Cyclonus figure that they put out. And then they put out this guy, and it's sort of like Bludgeon. At first glance, I thought it was essentially a repaint, but there is some retooling. He actually has a new head. This isn't Cyclonus' head. It looks like Cyclonus' head, but he's got like a different face, even though the shape of the head is kind of the same. But this guy's name is Ferak. And again, I wasn't familiar with him. I was like, where'd this guy come from? But I kind of didn't even care. Like, if they just made this guy up from scratch and just said, hey, we want to find a second reuse for that Cyclonus mold we invested in, that's fine with me. But this guy does have a little bit of an established presence. I guess he's kind of a background character in a couple of comic books. Because when they have to fill out crowd scenes, sometimes they will just take an established Transformer and color him a different color or whatever. So this guy here had appeared. They basically colored Cyclonus in red and gray. And then the fan club, they put out their own comics sometimes, same way the G.I. Joe Collectors Club used to put out their own comic books. And they kind of expanded on Ferak a little bit. So he's under my radar, but I already loved this toy. And I think it looks really cool in these colors.
Yeah, that is one creepy looking face.
Yeah, it's almost like a Wicked Witch face. He's got like a downward pointing nose. He's got this kind of protruding chin.
No, I love this figure.
He's cool, right? Like, he feels good to handle. He's a good size. He's sturdy. I just really like him. It's a solid sculpt.
Yeah, I'm a fan. I'm a fan of this guy. What's his name again?
Ferak.
Ferak.
Yeah, which this is one that is a bit of a bummer because I think I don't want to say I overpaid necessarily, but as soon as I saw him, because I think he was originally marketed as like an exclusive to like Hasbro or something, so I had to buy him from Hasbro. But anyway, he's at our local Walmart right now, so he's become easier to get than he originally was, and I probably could have got him for cheaper than I paid for him, but
you never know, though. That's the problem.
you never know. All right, one last Transformer to talk about. So I don't think you knew who this guy was, but we've talked a little bit about him off camera before. But yeah, so when I was a kid, I loved the Transformer comic books, and the comic book started out just like the cartoon, and that like the Transformers crash landed on Earth, and you followed Optimus Prime and all this stuff. But then every time new toys came out, which was every couple of months or something, they had to find a way like to introduce these new characters into the show and into the comic book. And so in the comic book, after we followed our heroes on Earth for about the first 15 issues of the comic book, there were some new toys they introduced. So the writers of the comic book said, well, why don't we just say, like, what's happening on Cybertron right now while these other things are going on Earth? And so that's where we first were introduced to Blaster, the guy that turns into a ghetto blaster. And he was dealing with this new villain that had risen in Megatron's absence called Straxus. Now, this was just a creation of the comic book writers because they needed something for Blaster to do on Cybertron, and Megatron was already on Earth. So they just created this villain. And he was a cool villain. Spoiler alert, he only lasted the 2 issues, and then he was dead. But he made a real impression on me at the time, because those issues were dark in that the Straxus he had, I think the storyline was called the Smelting Pool, and Straxus had a pool of molten metal, and he was doing these like kangaroo courts, and he would put people on trial, and then he would dunk them in the metal, and they would like melt, and there was something pretty like morbid about that. And so Blaster, he had a friend named Scrounge, and you kind of like just over the course of just the 2 issues, you're like, oh, I like this Scrounge guy. He was cute. The way he was drawn and stuff, and
don't like him for too long though.
Yeah, and then Scrounge got like melted, and so Blaster had to like get revenge or whatever. I might not be remembering the storyline exactly. I haven't read it in a long, long time. But anyway, Straxus was this big menacing guy with this kind of, the face kind of reminded me of like almost Emperor Zurg. He's got that kind of, and he had a big like axe. And I could still picture the cover of the comic book, and it was actually, they took that comic book art and they put it on the box for this figure, which I'll put a split screen in here. So it's really cool. You got that image of Straxus swinging his axe and Blaster trying to like jump out of the way. Anyway, so as a kid, the idea of getting toys of characters that never had toys before, because they weren't really intended to, because the same thing happened in G.I. Joe. Larry Hama, who wrote the G.I. Joe comic book, he needed more characters in those early days before there was a million toys to choose from. He needed characters to fill out the storyline, so he just kind of created characters like Dr. Venom, who never got a toy. And you're always like, I want a Dr. Venom toy. So I always wanted Straxus. And it wasn't for years and years later, when I started collecting as an adult, they released this toy. And I'll show you how underwhelming it is. And yet I was still very excited when I saw it. So this toy was named Darkmount. So they didn't call him Straxus, but it's very clearly Straxus. Like, he's Straxus's colors, he's Straxus's head, he's Straxus's axe. But in the comic book, Straxus ruled over a city on Cybertron called Darkmount. So I don't know, it must have been a copyright thing. Maybe they couldn't use the name Straxus.
They call him Darkmount.
They called him Darkmount. So when I saw that toy, I was like, oh my god, that's the guy with the axe from that comic book from when I was a kid. So I was so happy to get this character. But when you handle that toy for more than a second, he's very spindly.
Yeah.
He can't stand up really on his own weight unless you position him just so, because he's got all these like a thin little waist on his,
the feet are terrible too.
Yeah, it kind of sucks. Plus, when you saw that image of him swinging the axe, he was big. And this guy, he's about the same size as like Bumblebee. He's kind of a smaller toy. He's just, the design's a little too busy, so I was happy to have this guy represented, but it didn't really do him justice. So this year, finally, Hasbro put out a good Straxus figure and
called him Straxus.
So you can see size-wise, he is substantially bigger than the previous version. He's substantially heavier and bulkier. Like it's a that's a solid toy.
He's sturdy.
Yeah. And I believe he's built off. He's a heavy retool of the Galvatron, which I loved that Galvatron figure too. So he's big, he's heavy, he's thick. He looks right. The colors are right. The weapons are right. Like he's not perfect. Like when I think we talked about him before, he's got some of this extra kibble.
Yeah,
he's got a lot of kibble on his back. He's got extra kibble on his arms. It's more than I'd like to see for a modern Transformer. But still, I can forgive all that stuff just because they finally gave me a cool Straxus. And he is very cool.
Yeah, I like this guy.
So, yeah. It wasn't a whole lot of Transformers this year, but the ones I got were pretty cool. There's some pretty major wins here. And next year, I don't think it's going to be a big year for Transformers for me either, but I already know I'm getting that Gears.
Mm-hmm.
I missed out on Ramjet from the first time he was released a while ago, and he's the only Seeker Jet I still need, so I'm getting the re-release of Ramjet. He's on pre-order. And then the Constructicons, they're putting out those new versions of the Constructicons.
Yeah, I've even thought about getting those.
So yeah, I plan to probably buy all 6 of them. They haven't announced a whole lot beyond that, but I'm hoping it's a lot of things that I won't need. Like, new Optimus, new Megatron. I can skip all that stuff. The only reason I'm buying the Decepticons again, or the Constructicons, is because I have the versions from, what was it? I don't know, whenever the Combiner Wars or whatever it was. But I have Devastator fully formed up on my shelf. And when you have the combined version of Devastator, that means you don't have the individual Constructicons. Yeah. So if I get the new versions, I will display them as individual characters because I really like some of those individual characters like Scrapper and Long Haul and stuff. So, anyway.
I can't remember their names, but I had the dump truck and the tractor thing.
Yeah, Long Haul is the dump truck, and I think you were describing Scrapper with the bucket.
And they had a cement truck too.
Mixmaster.
They're
all cool. I like all of them.
Yeah.
So that's why it's kind of a shame. Like Devastator, he's up on my shelf here, and he looks really cool, towering over everybody. But it's like, man, there's 6 cool toys lost in there, and that's the same as like he's right next to my Predaking, who's made up of the Predacons.
Yeah.
I feel the same about him. I love like the guys that make him up. And it's like, so I would totally buy new versions of the Predacons again, too. Anyway, I know you're tired. You got to work. Well, I'll let you go.
That's okay.
Thanks for sitting with me, because I know this was basically just me talking at you.
That's okay. I enjoy learning about Transformers and seeing what I've missed out on since I sold my collection, which I deeply regret. But
what are you going to do? All right. Well, thank you guys very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. Probably by the time I've got this video posted, we're going to be getting pretty close to Christmas.
It's the 5th?
It's the 5th when we're shooting this, but we shot 2 episodes tonight. So first I have to edit my G.I. Joe episode. That probably won't get out for a few days. And then this one probably won't be for another week after that.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're definitely mid-December by the time this is getting posted. So your birthday's coming up.
Yeah, the 17th.
And your Christmas is coming up.
Yeah.
And then New Year's is coming up, so our next couple of videos are probably going to be like our best of lists and things like that. So stay tuned for all that. Anyway, thank you very much for watching. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, leave us comments below. All that stuff.
Keep collecting.
Ciao.